This is why it's hard work. And what we've got to realize is how profoundly deep these delusions go in the mind. That's Buddha's view. So that means the attitude has to be that you're in for the long plan. There's no magic fix overnight. You go for a weekend course, you give up cigarettes. I mean, it depends on the person. I gave up cigarettes overnight and it never bothered me again. So it depends on the object and the person and the time. Other objects, some people struggle their whole lives, you know. Depends, isn't it? Some things. I mean, for me, I've got far more attachment to food than cigarettes. Like, I just don't give up eating attachment overnight to food. It's still there, you understand? So part of the deal is, and it's this whole progressive approach of first controlling your body and speech, harnessing, using your discipline to harness that part. And that's powerful. And it's not enough to say, oh, I'll give up cigarettes, but it's got to be every day training yourself, programming yourself to see the benefits and to want to do it, and every day. And then, you know, and especially we have practices we call purification, and the end part of which is like determination to change. You make the decision. So that every day you watch, like a hawk, every day you do it. That's the first step. Then the next one is the harder work, which is dealing with the attachment itself. And that's what we don't deal with in our culture. You go to AA, it's brilliant. And you give up the object, and that wonderful system, but then we just put it onto something else. Whereas the Buddhist one is you now have the space to go more deeply to deal with the nature of attachment itself. And this is not easy. I promise the word is so simple, but it goes profoundly deep and it's multifaceted. And it might be just for one object, but then if that object gets boring, then we'll just change it to another object and another object and another object. You understand? So it's long term. It's long term. Deal with it. That's right, precisely. That's right. Yeah, of course it does, because we don't know how to deal with the actual nature of the mind itself, you know, and that's the Buddha's expertise, I would say. So, then the point to realise is that actually attachment, you know, we usually tend to think it's a problem in the West if the object is very strong. Like if you want to jump on 22 girls every day, you've got a problem. If you want to eat 47 cakes every day, you've got a problem. Or alcohol and heroin, because they're really intense objects. But we don't think of attachment to being seen as a nice boy, attachment to having a perfect house. They're all attachment as well, but you can there's levels and levels of intensity. So put it this way, in the long term, the Mahayana point of view is we've got attachment till we're highly realized beings, but it lessens, it diminishes. So then you be skillful. So given that we've got attachment, you know, then at least you give up the things that are harmful to you or harmful to others, and you knowing that you've got attachment for a long time, it gets less, then at least the things you do, you make sure you choose things that are really useful to be attached to. So if you like having girlfriends, let's say, but you're used to, you know, because you're a bit self-piteous and ridiculous, and you keep choosing horrible girlfriends who beat you up and are mean to you. You understand? Let's say. So maybe you keep your attachment, but you start choosing decent girlfriends who'll support you in your practice and help you become a better person. That's skillful means. If you're going to be attached to a job, being an accountant, let's say you really like your accountancy job, well, stop doing the work of accountancy for the gunmaker and start being an accountant for a really useful company. Do you get my point? So there's levels and levels of being skillful, and you channel that energy. But to sort of think, I've got to give up all the attachment, don't forget it. It's just ridiculous. You can't. But we've got to know what it means, attachment. We've got to distinguish it. In relationship to people, we've got to distinguish attachment from love. And in relationship to things, we've got to make the distinction between harmful things and not so harmful things. Do you understand my point? It's like progressive, levels and levels. Finally, as you really progress, we've got to give up all attachment. But that's a long way to go, you know. Be skillful. Do you understand? Good. What else, people? Questions that came from your discussions? Well, nothing? Everything was clear, was it? I mean, any questions come up about karma? I mean, we've just hardly begun to talk about it. Where are you? Yes. Yeah.
How would you be able to explain to a person who has big sufferings like physical disability?
That's right.
That what that person has
yes.
due to karma?
Right. Equally, forcefully, putting the other point of view, what would you say to a person who's very happy and has got beautiful health to explain to them why they've got that? Because it's the same answer. It's due to their past actions. So the person who's got happiness and money in the bank and lovely friends, that's due to their past not lying and not stealing and their virtue. So it's the same. I mean, we never think to explain to a person why good things happen because no one cares why. Just give me more, please. Do you understand my point?
Yeah.
But no, you get the point, though, what I'm making, and it's equally important. But the point is, it's the question of whether the person wants to know. If this person sits in front of you and they're crying, and you don't start jumping karma on them, that would be outrageous. It depends on the person. It depends on the sweetie, listen to me carefully. This is the point. If this person is a random person you've just met, and they haven't asked you, why am I in a wheelchair, you don't start talking, well, because blah, 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 blah. It's only if a person is coming to you and is talking and you're interested in Buddhism, they ask the question, then you talk about it. Do you see my point?
Yeah. How would you explain it, therefore, to a non-Buddhist person?
If they want to know.
Yeah.
Even most Buddhists don't know. Forget about modern Buddhists. Even most Buddhists haven't got a clue about karma and don't like karma. I would explain it in terms of what I said before. That what Buddha says, Buddha says that whatever we are, whatever we think, whatever we do, whatever happens to us, is the fruit of our past actions. And I mean by that's including the good ones. Are you hearing me here? Well, that's the answer. That's the general answer. And if they say, that's a good idea, and then change the subject, then leave it there. If they want to go further, then you discuss. Do you understand? But it's up to what the person really wants, and most people don't really want to know. Even Buddhists don't like it, you know. Do you understand my point?
Yeah.
But the general answer is you have to know about it yourself. The Buddha's view. If you're interested in the Buddha's view, try and understand it. And because it's hard to hear it because we are so shocked when it always comes to negative things, and we're always so shocked. The biggest shock to us is that we are the creators of our own reality. That's the shock, because we all of us have the default belief that we're innocent victims who were made by someone else. Do you agree with that? So that's why karma is a shocking view, because it says that we're in charge, and that's not how we think. And the usual way that karma is presented by most people, by most Buddhists, and how it's interpreted by non-Buddhists is as just exactly the same as terrible, terrible punishment. Because that's how we think about morality. That if you've got suffering, you must have been a bad person. Oh, that's a shocking view, we say, you know. So it takes a while to hear it oneself, and the more we can internalise it and understand it, the more clearly you can present it to other people. But you have to be clear about it. So how do you understand? Do you take it on board as a view that you've got, or are you just out of interest listening to it?
No, well, I'm still struggling understanding how I would be able maybe to explain that whatever happened back.
Well, explain it to yourself, though. So how do you explain it to yourself?
Sorry?
Forget other people. No, what's your name? So, hang on, wait. I know you are. What's your name? Who? Fabio. So the real question is, how do I describe karma to myself? Forget other people. So talk about yourself. What do you understand?
Yeah, I'm here to learn.
I know. You can't yet?
Yeah.
Oh, okay then. Also keep learning.
Yeah, sure. That's why I'm asking.
So you want me to talk more about karma?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, good. You should have said that. Okay. All right. I've presented all the bullet points already. So to understand karma, we have to first take on board the idea that your mind is not physical. And that's a huge one. The first thing people say is, what are you talking about? How can I be supposed to believe that, you know? Well, no one's asking you to believe it. You take it as a view. It's a view that does exist on the planet, coming from Buddhism and the previous Indian views, that we have a consciousness that is not physical. So one takes it as a hypothesis. That's the first one that has to be understood. Because without that, if the mind is the brain, then the whole view of karma, the whole philosophical presentation in all the Buddhist literature over the centuries is an utter load of absurdity. It has no basis. It's nonsense. Do you understand my point? That's the first point, Fabio. So you've got to take the view that your consciousness is not physical and that it didn't begin in your mother's womb. This is absolutely fundamental. Do you understand that point first? And all you can do is hypothesize it, because you're not clairvoyant yet, so you can't prove it. But when you've got single point of concentration and your mind goes to a more subtle level, then you will remember your past life. You will see it, then you can prove it. But until then, it's a theory for us. Do you understand? That's the first point. The second then has to be the question, well, if my mind went from before and comes into my womb now, well, why did it come into that mother's womb? And why have I got certain tendencies? And why does certain thing happens to me? That's the question, isn't it? Why, you know? Well, then that's the Buddha's view. The Buddha's view is that everything we think and do and say leaves seeds in our mind, like I said before. So at the time of conception, we come fully programmed with all those seeds from the past. So then we live out our life and we ripen those seeds. So the first one is the type of rebirth you've got. Now the Buddha would say you getting a human body is like you've won the lottery, you know. So fortunate to have a human life. And then to have the tendencies in here, the second way karma ripens is all your tendencies, which are a bunch of habits. If you have a tendency to lie, be good at music, kill, steal, look at the world. Since tiny children, we can even see ourselves, isn't it? That we've got certain tendencies. So the materialist model is I got them from mummy and daddy, and we track it back to mummy, daddy, grandma, grandpa, and the monkeys, isn't it? That's how we do it in the West, isn't it? So if it fits as a fairly regular quality like playing piano or being angry, we can sort of see maybe that mummy and daddy like that. But when you've got extreme examples, like Mother Teresa, there's no evidence that she had a really holy mother, and there's no evidence that Hitler had some wacko mummy who killed millions of Jews. So you can't see the evidence in the past with them. Do you understand my point? So that's where that falls down, I'd suggest. So you take this view that everything comes in the mind. The consciousness is not physical. It's come from past habit, from being in previous lives. You bring it into this present life. Your body is from your own past morality, in our case. You've got tendencies depending on the habit. You might have a habit to be good at music, good at killing, because you've done them before. Lying, you've done it before. Being good at loving, you've done it before. They're habits. They're basically habits. That's the one. That's the way that first way karma will happen. Second way. Third one is the stuff that happens to you. Everything that happens to you. Every second of the day, would you agree something happens to you? Would you agree with that? Every second of the day, something good or something bad happens. The traffic was horrible, the traffic was nice. People smile, people were mean. Every single day, every one of those experiences is the fruit of a past action of yours, necessarily. And then even the environmental, which seems even a more subtle one, how the very physical world itself and the way it impacts upon you, that even too is the result of your past actions. They're the four main things. And that includes all the good things and all the bad things. But we never think of the good things, like I said, only think of the bad things. And why is very fascinating. I think it's very fascinating. It's because of attachment and anger. So when good things happen, it fits attachment. Attachment gets what it wants, so it gets excited. So we assume we deserve it. And I think in our world we have this deep assumption we deserve good things. We just assume we deserve it. We don't think there has to be a cause. We don't care if I deserve it. We just know we assume we deserve it. So when we get it, we just think, well, I deserve happiness. I deserve people to be kind to me. But the second a person is mean to you, you know how you feel. Ego rises up. How dare you do that to me? I don't deserve it. That's how we think. So in terms of deserve and not deserve is meaningless for the Buddha. It's more why the real thing to say is when bad things happen, I get angry and I don't like that. That's at least reasonable. And every time good things happen, I like that and I grasp to get more. So the real problem is attachment and aversion. But we have these misconceptions, Buddha says. Deserve is ridiculous. Like I said, money in the bank, whatever's there, you deserve it. Flowers in the garden, they're yours, you deserve it. But we don't have that view when it comes to happiness and suffering. We think it comes from someone else. You understand? So all these are the assumptions we've got deep in our mind, which we have to think about. So now, okay then, so let's narrow down to one more next level about karma. If in general everything we experience, everything we think, everything that happens to us is the fruit of past actions, and we do also know we can divide our lives into happy experiences and suffering experiences in general, can't we? Would you agree with that? Then we better start to say, well, what's the cause of a suffering experience? What's the cause of a happy experience? We need to know that, don't we? That's the crucial piece. In other words, you know that everything is in a garden is the fruit of you sowing seeds. But you've got to know in your garden you've got some weeds and some herbs. Well, you know you want the weeds and don't want the herbs. So we now got to narrow it down. Well, how to identify a weed so I don't grow it, and how to identify a herb so I do grow it. That seems reasonable, doesn't it? Well, here we have negative actions and positive actions. And this is where we have to now understand how we create those. This is the basis of understanding karma and the basis of Buddha's view about the mind. So now we look, as I said before, to the view of the mind. We've got negative and positive states of mind. Forget the mechanics, the other bits, We've got states of mind that are neurotic, I-based, fear-based, deluded, and neurotic, and necessarily cause me suffering, and necessarily cause me to do things with my body and speech that harm others. They're called negative actions. And we have good qualities in here, love, compassion, kindness, that are necessarily the source of the things that I do with my body and speech that benefit others. So a virtuous action is an action you do that helps another that's based on a good motivation. A negative action is an action you do that harms another that's based on a negative motivation. That's the principle. You understand? Now let's unpack that, okay? Okay, so there are two things about this. In general, a negative action for the Buddha at this heavier level is where it affects others. So the heaviest negative actions are those that harm others. But he says, and that's why he wants us to, he suggests we don't do them. For our sake, we take the advice of the doctor. But the point is this, and this is the crucial piece. What makes the action I do sow a seed in my mind that's negative, that will ripen as my suffering in the future, is not based upon the action itself only. It's based upon the motivation. So I'll give an example, like a good action. So let's say everybody in the world would agree that an action of generosity would go under the heading positive action. Would you agree? You agree with that? And an action called killing in general is a negative action. You agree? In general, okay. Well, you can imagine a situation when you're walking down the street and there's a homeless person, which is, they're poor, right? And you see them as, you can even have the thought, I'm not going to give any money to that smelly homeless person. You can think that. But 20 francs drops out of your pocket, and they get 20 francs. Well, they're happy. They've got their 20 francs, aren't they? The result was 20 francs. But you created no virtuous karma. In fact, you created negative karma because you thought, I'm not going to give that creepy person money. But your mind wasn't involved in the 20 francs, was it? So that wasn't technically an action. They'll say, oh, thank you. You'll go, what for? I didn't do anything. So you didn't create any virtuous karma. In fact, you even created negative karma in your mind, at least, because you wanted to be mean and miserly. So do you see my point? They get the 20 francs, but you create no virtuous karma. In just the same way, you could have a mouse in your kitchen, and you don't see it, but you put your foot on it and it dies. You don't even know. How can you say you created the karma of killing? You haven't. The mouse did die, but your mind wasn't involved. So the key point is, when your mind is involved in the action, that's what determines the karma you create. And we do many things when our mind's not involved. We do mostly mindlessly. Do you understand my point? So we'll break that down a bit. So, for example, the action of generosity. There's 4 ways, like I said before, there's 4 ways you can describe these 4 tracks of karma. One is the fully ripened result, or one is the main one, which is the type of rebirth we get. The second one is our tendencies in our mind. The third is our experiences at the hands of others. And the fourth is environmental. Do you understand? So any action can have any of those 4 results. So a complete action of generosity based upon a pure motivation. That means there'd have to be 4 things in place. First, the person, homeless person. Second, your mind involved. The intention, I will give that person 20 francs. Motivation, oh, I have compassion. Generosity. So there's 2 bits, the intention to give it and your motivation that's pure. Do you understand? And they come together. The third, you hand over the 20 francs. Fourth, they get the 20 francs. That's a complete action of generosity. And you will sow a good seed in your mind, go into your main bank vault. It'll multiply those seeds, and one day, eventually, it'll ripen as many happy rebirths. Second, it'll ripen as a tendency to keep being generous. Third, it'll ripen as people giving to you. And fourth, it'll ripen as a very delicious environment. Every karma of every kind, good or bad, has any of those 4, and all ripening in different varieties and different intensities. Do you understand? This is a technical explanation of the universe for the Buddha. All right? Does that help a bit? Okay, good. Okay, yes. Yeah. Yes. A bit confused. Start again. The law of karma is what links it all. So consciousness in general is a river of mental moments that never begins and never ends. It just keeps going. But what goes on in it at any given point is because of what you put in there and what you experience. And what you put in now produces the future. Oh, okay, Buddhism doesn't say trees have consciousness. No, okay, so first of all, a sentient being, the term in Tibetan is very nice, mind possessor. So for the Buddha, there are trillions of mind possessors. An ant, humans, dogs, lions, things we can see on this planet, baby tiny creatures in the earth, little tiny bugs, dust mites. There are trillions of creatures who we can see who move and seems to have some kind of consciousness. They're called sentient beings, mind possessors. But there's also trillions of other mind possessors that we can't see, that are invisible to our eyes, but actually are existing, real beings having real experiences from the Buddhist perspective in different realms of existence. So trillions upon trillions. In fact, even this universe as we know it, there's not an atom of space you won't find sentient beings. Everywhere, pervaded. Okay, that's one point. Second, there's two types of phenomena in the universe, speaking simply. There's matter, and in the Buddhist view, they still use the same old-fashioned model of the four elements. That's still used today. The Tibetan medical system uses that. In the Vajrayana Buddhism, it describes the physical energies in terms of the four elements. It's the entire universe. The world is made of the four elements, earth, air, fire, and water. And that's the matter, and then there are minds. And in the Vajrayana model, Tantrayana, there's these detailed descriptions of the intimate relationship between internal and external, meaning physical and mental. And as I say in those teachings, all minds, like your consciousness, is conjoined with your set of the four elements. And at the moment, like all of us, your gross level of physical is this gross body, but then you've got subtle mind, which we only really experience in dreams, or if we're in a coma, or if you're a great meditator. That's also inextricably linked to the set of the four elements, and even a subtler level of them. So they're the elements. So the point is this inextricable relationship between the four elements and all beings' minds. And that's why in the end we can have environmental karma. Whatever we do in our mind impacts upon the elements and then has an impact upon the external elements as well, and so produces the different things we experience. But in general, a tree is not a consciousness, is not a mind possessor. An ant is a mind possessor. This is a mind possessor. This stuff here is the same stuff as the tree. The difference from the Buddhist perspective would say this is imbued with a personal consciousness that belongs to this stuff. But a tree doesn't have its own personal consciousness. Now, you can't know that until you're clairvoyant. But that's the Buddhist way of saying it. A rock is not a sentient being. It is that. Indeed, it is.
Plants are also organisms.
They are that. Yeah. Yeah, and Buddha would agree, just before we go further, Buddha would agree with that totally from the physical point of view. That yes, it's exactly the same, but a sentient being has a consciousness which is not physical, and that's the distinguishing feature. Are you hearing my point? I'm just giving you Buddha's view. You don't have to agree with it. So the point is the Buddhist. I mean, it's absolutely right. That's the four elements. Your body's the four elements. The trees are four elements. The entire physical world is made of the four elements. Buddha agrees with that. But the difference between this set of four elements and that cushion, which is the four elements, is it's not imbued with its own consciousness. Your body is imbued with its own consciousness. We can't prove that until we're highly more realized, but that's the Buddhist position. You get my point?
Yes, I'm asking myself, when did consciousness in humans start to arise?
Okay, consciousness never arose. It's always it's beginningless. Okay, no, you're conscious. No, you began as a human being. What's your name? Jem. How do you spell it? Oh, where's that from? Turkey. Jem. Okay, good. J or ch. J, like a J. Jem. Okay, good, Jem. So then the Buddha's view is that, Jem is made up of the four elements and a consciousness, and it's gross, subtle, and very subtle levels. They're inextricably linked and interdependently work together. What the time of conception is when that consciousness came from before, from a previous life, and joined the egg and the sperm of your mummy and daddy. That's the beginning of Jem. That's second. And all the tendencies that you are now expressing in Jem's life have come from your past habits. So the karma that before you were reborn, a few weeks before your mummy and daddy hopped into bed or wherever they hopped, to create the condition for Jem to come, you're in a previous body. Even before you stop breathing, these four main sets of karma ripened for you. The one that must have been very strong morality from non-killing in particular, as Lama Zopa says, probably practiced in the context of past spiritual practice, and even created by you probably in the context of keeping vows of morality. That was the seed that was triggered even before you stop breathing in the past life, which already program you to go to Jem's mummy and daddy. Second, at the same time, all the tendencies in Jem's mind, your habits, your tendencies, you wish to be a spiritual person, your whatever it is in your mind, they also were triggered to become part of your personality. The third one is all the experiences at the hands of others, starting with your mummy and your daddy, and since up until now, how you've been seen and treated by others. All those karmic seeds were triggered. And even the fourth one, the way the physical environment impacts upon you. All those seeds were there ready. And then your mind found its way eventually to the new mummy and daddy when they hopped into bed, and now all those seeds are ripening in you and your life. And every second since you were born, you are sowing new seeds in your mind that will produce future lives. Every second of the day. That's the Buddha's explanation, roughly speaking. Okay? All right. Yeah.
So let's take our consciousness through our lifetimes.
Yes.
Several lives. So how you see the influence of our parents and grandparents?
Yes.
You said they only give us the physical body.
That's right.
But there are some techniques in other traditions
Yes.
that you kind of look at
Ancestors.
how they live.
Yes.
So you can then kind of understand your
Yes.
behaviors.
I understand. I would say that's to do with the physical. I mean, okay, the materialist philosophical view is that one. We only look to the past. Buddha looks to the past because our own past. But the West, we look to the past, the only past we've got is through the physical, through mummy, daddy, grandma, grandpa, isn't it? That's all we can do. Through the genes, the DNA, we go right back to the monkeys, and that's how we try to interpret the way we are now. But that's, for me, confusing, using Buddha's understanding, the mental and the physical. So, that's one point. But the second point, it is evident that we are very highly interdependent beings. Every tiny thing that happens to us from the outside impacts upon us. It's clear if my mother hits me every day, it's obvious it's going to have an effect on me. But the point is this. In our modern in the materialist culture, we think mummy hitting me every day is the reason why I'm angry. But the Buddha would say, no, mummy hitting me every day triggers my own tendency for anger. The tendency is mine. Many people get hit, but they don't have anger. They get sad, they get fearful, but no anger. So that's the difference. Buddha implies we've got this, our own stuff is there. So the white supremacist boy I mentioned, he read Hitler. But because he already had those imprints in his mind that fitted with Hitler's thinking, then he went like a magnet. Do you see my point? So that's the point that Buddha's factoring in. Everything that happens out there, of course it plays a role. Look at my example of me when I was a little girl. I was a maniac because the house was a maniac. Drama, people, not enough beds, no money, crazy father. There's enormously powerful impact upon me, but then it fed my chaos. It fed my anger, my craziness. Give me another condition, I became like a saint, Do you understand? So external, of course it plays a role. And that's why we've got your question. If we have any self-respect, we will recognize certain conditions, or you with addiction, let's say, not yours, but anybody's, we'll recognize the conditions that trigger our delusion. So we'll respect ourselves and keep away. And keep ourselves in good conditions, around nice people, and a nice job so that it encourages your virtue. That's intelligence. Do you understand? Whereas we just tend to blame the outside for everything. But this is a way more nuanced kind of view. You understand my point?